Sabres Live is presented by Seneca Resorts and Casinos. Nothing else comes close.
Buffalo Sabres are proud to select from Winnipeg in the Western Hockey League, Matthew Savoie.
Good call, Boosh.
Really interesting first 9 picks in the NHL Draft here in Montreal. It is great to be on site at Bell Center. Sabres Live at the Draft with Marty Biron. I'm Brian Duff. Sabres prospect analyst Kris Baker in studio with us tonight. And we have an opportunity now to zero in on Buffalo's first of potentially 3 first-round selections. Marty, you get first crack at it here with Matthew Savoie.
Okay, Matt Savoie is a very, very quick, smaller forward that could play both the center and the wing position. I love how he drives the middle of the ice, is not afraid to go to hard areas to create for himself. Had 90 points this year in the Western Hockey League, which is a great production from a 17-year-old. So amazing season. Unfortunately, it was cut short with the injury, but I got to see James Patrick before, about an hour ago. He coached Savoie, coach Peyton Krebs, and he says those guys have high motors, they're driven, so I think that's a great selection for Kevin Adams and the Sabres.
Kris Baker, what did you see in this young prospect, let's say a couple years ago, if possible, because he's been on the radar for a long time, and then now what is he that Buffalo is getting at this point in time?
Yeah, you saw Duff for a high-energy, creative playmaker. He came down a year ago and played in the United States Hockey League in Dubuque during the COVID-19 shutdown of the WHL, and he was lights out down there, had a fantastic year. Kind of like what Marty said, you saw his knack for getting to the middle of the ice. He's an aggressive battler, does a lot of wonderful work on the power play, but at even strength, gets to the middle of the ice. Everything is fast with this player. So, he's not a guy that slows the tempo down a lot. Everything is go, 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 and he can shoot it. It's something about this Kootenay Ice and now Winnipeg Ice franchise, whether it's Sam Reinhart, Peyton Krebs, these high IQ playmakers, these guys that practice and prepare like professionals. Matthew Savoie is the next in a long line of these type of players. I don't worry about the size at all with this player at 5'9", almost 180 pounds. He can go, he can make plays, and he loves to get to the middle of the ice. Like I said, this is not a perimeter player. He is going to put his head down and get to the net and drive and make plays around the net.
Bakes, how would you describe his skating, aside from the pace with which he plays at? How is he as a skater?
His skating is fine. I mean, he can go. I mean, his stride is good. I've never noticed any issues with his stride. He doesn't need to work on smoothing it out. He knows how to. The issue with his skating really is that he doesn't change gears a lot because everything is so fast. Sometimes a playmaker, you want to come into the zone, slow the game down a little bit, let your line mates catch up and find opportunities to make passes to them. He doesn't do that. Everything is just so fast. That's one area of his skating game. Because again, I'm not going to talk about his technique or his mechanics so much. I'm going to talk about how he uses his skating moving forward to leverage more playmaking opportunities with this player. But I mean, his mobility, his four-way agility, everything that he needs to get to the inside, he has that tool. So I don't really worry about his feet at all, Duffer.
Yeah, it wasn't so much trying to suggest that there was a worry. It was more just trusting how you view these guys. And I'm intrigued just because of the pace of play being a significant attribute, and then you combine it with the vision. Now, I guess, because he is in the Sabres system, we'll start by projecting, Marty, where you could see Matthew Savoie in a couple of years.
Well, obviously, in a couple of years. I said that on the show earlier on Sabres Live this afternoon, that if a player like Savoie was selected by the Sabres, I think you're looking at Tage Thompson, middle of the ice, big, tall. Now, not overly physical, but if you are going to face off against a big centerman, shutdown centerman on another team, Tage Thompson can handle it. Dylan Cousins can also handle the physicality. Bigger, stronger type centerman. Now, I know Peyton Krebs plays middle. Matt Savoie may play center. You don't know. But I think if you are kind of insulating Savoie in his early years by having a couple of big centers right in front of him, I think he fits in perfectly as a third-line centerman, moving up to maybe a second-line centerman if you need him to be there, or you put him in the top 6 on the wing because he can score and have the production.
Bakes, how do you see him?
Yeah, I think if you have to bring him on as a wing, and that's a smart thing to do with a young player, kind of simplify his life, right? Put him out on the wing, and he doesn't have to manage those responsibilities down the middle. He's a very fast catch-and-release shooter. So to Marty's point, if you put him out there on the flank for a little while to get acclimated to the NHL game speed, he's a guy that can also give fits to big defenders because, again, his feet are always moving. He can turn the corner on him. There's a lot to like there if you put him out there to kind of insulate him and simplify his life in the beginning. But his shooting, we talk a lot about his playmaking, his IQ. His shot is very good as well, and he shoots from all over the ice.
Do you have a comparable for this player at this point in time? Be it among his peer group, age group, or what might already be in, the younger stages of an NHL career.
Well,
you
it's
draw
really
any
funny.
parallels?
Yeah, it's really funny because when you ask him, a lot of these younger, smallish, sub-6-foot players, they'll say Braden Point. I see a lot of Matthew Barzal with him. I saw even Tyler Ennis back in, 2007, 2008 because they were slippery, they were fast, they were always moving their feet. Everything was quick, bang, bang plays around the net. I see a lot of that with Savoie. Those were actually two names that I had written down in my notes when scouting this player this year, is that I remember watching Tyler Ennis. I remember watching Barzal when he was in Seattle. And there's a lot of elements to those games, and this was before Braden Point came on the scene. But, and I actually see a little bit of that Barzal where he'll come to the top of the zone. He can, kind of attack on an arc at the top of the zone and kind of survey the ice in front of him and find options to make passes. But a lot of times, he'll just elect to shoot instead from the top.
Bakes, what about a timeline for a player like Matt Savoie? Like, we know that Dylan Cousins got to come up a little quicker with the pandemic and the shutdown of the CHL. Same for Jack Quinn. Owen Power, Rasmus Dahlin were going to be in the NHL pretty much right as soon as they made the decision. What about Matt Savoie?
Well, I think, 1 year, next year, I personally wouldn't need him or want him up in the NHL right away. I think give him a year, go play World Juniors. He's going to be at Canada's World Junior selection camp this summer. Should have, in theory, a pretty good chance of making that team for this winter's tournament. Let him get that experience being a leader. And I think that second year, though, I wouldn't be surprised, just given his game, given his dynamic skating, given his ability. Again, he has a pretty nice resume here in the junior ranks. He just had, 90 points last year. He's good on face-offs. There's not a ton of things he needs to work on. Maybe just getting stronger for one more year and then really take a run in that second post-draft year. I can see that. But, if this is a player that goes back for 2 years of juniors, it's not really going to hurt him at all. But, I can see 1 year and then come into camp in that second year and really take a run at a job.
Any concerns at all? And I'm guessing hard no, based on the fact that Buffalo just drafted him and did their due diligence. But the shoulder injury that ended his playoffs prematurely.
I haven't heard any negatives about it thus far. Usually something like that would come out at the combine where you would hear those concerns kind of creep into the discussion with a player that had an injury in the playoffs. So, right now, as long as he's getting his, rest and rehab, and unless we hear something about it, I'm not seeing too much to worry about there with him. And I think we'll know pretty soon, too, because that Canada's World Junior Camp is going to be coming up if he's on the ice there. And, of course, also we'll get a look at him here in development camp, presumably. That would be a good indication as well that those concerns are limited or null and void altogether.
I think, obviously, you take your time with Matt Savoie. You have the time. We think of Tage Thompson. He had the injury, and maybe I don't know if it's a similar injury or not, but I would think that the Sabres did their homework and looked at the file and felt comfortable because, well, a guy like Tage Thompson, with the year that he had and overcoming a shoulder injury like that, I think that, you can put him on the right path.
Bakes, as this first round was unfolding and continues to unfold here at Bell Center, were you thinking that it was going to point in this direction for Buffalo?
I thought, I wasn't really surprised. I was surprised in the order of picks that went down, first of all. I wasn't surprised necessarily in the players that were taken until I saw Korchinski go off the board, and I thought maybe that would open up some opportunities. But when you looked at what the Sabres needed positionally, and again, I think, when you're in a top 10 and you're not going to solve all of your issues in an organization in one pick, right? You still saw a need for them to have some center depth going. Okay, now we just talked about Savoie potentially starting his career out as a wing. Nathan McKinnon started out as a winger. The reality, though, is that long-term, Matthew Savoie is a centerman, and I think that that's where he ultimately will slot in the NHL. So I think from that perspective, again, I'm not really worried about size. I have already mentioned Tyler Ennis in this broadcast here. We're going back to 2018. This was a player that came into the NHL Combine at 5'8", 150 pounds. Ennis just last year played at 160 pounds. Okay, so if Savoie's 5'9", 180, he's already ahead of the curve, so I'm not worried about that there. I think the Sabres needed that explosiveness down the middle. They check that box with Savoie. And I think, again, it's going to give him flexibility moving forward. He has a little bit of a different look than the other centermen that they have in the prospect ranks right now. So I like the pick for, who he is as a player. I like the pick for the relationship that he has with Peyton Krebs. I think there's something there, too, that's just going to help bring him along, just like Krebs helped bring him along when he first got to Winnipeg. I think it's a really good pick. It wasn't a guy that I initially connected dots to originally, though, Duffer. That's what's a little surprising for me.
Yeah, well, just to follow up on the shoulder, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot with this. I knew Lance had tweeted about it yesterday, and we had Lance on the show today talking about an awful lot that's happening in Saberland. But, well, let's rewind it a few weeks ago to the Combine, and obviously Savoie wasn't a participant in the testing. And back then, Mike Morial from NHL.com, who was, again, one of our draft insiders, talked about the fact that Savoie didn't need shoulder surgery, got out of his sling, probably towards the end of May, first couple of days of June, and the movement had been much better. And then Lance Lysowski from the Buffalo News yesterday tweeted that he has, Savoie that is, regained full movement in the shoulder. Next step is building back the strength, has resumed skating, but not cleared for contact yet. So that puts into perspective just what we should expect with development camp next week.
Yeah, and if we remember, and I hate to bring up bad memories, but Dylan Cousins, when he came to the development camp, and he had
broke a thumb right away. Yeah.
Things in hockey, obviously, you're going to have injuries,
Yes.
and you've got to just roll with it a little bit. Some you're more comfortable than others. Now, Bakes, let me ask you this. You said the top 6 went pretty much the way you thought the players, maybe not the order. The Sabres this afternoon tried to move up to 7, and we don't know if they tried to move up on the floor tonight. Do you think that Savoie was really high on their list, that they were thinking maybe he wasn't going to be available at 9, or were they just hoping to be able to get Savoie and somebody else who maybe they can get at 16?
I've always thought that they kind of coveted Cutter Gauthier, but I do think obviously they like Savoie. I think it's pretty clear now that they made the pick. It's hard to say that for sure they went up to 7 to make sure they got Savoie. So that's a really hard question to answer, Marty. Honestly, I think they'll also, I could see, Casper, who went right before they picked, could have been, right there as an opportunity for them as well. But, going back to the injury real quick too, and Marty, you made something that, you made a point that I thought was critical here. I mean, it is hockey. He played 75 games last year with the regular season and playoffs. There's going to be dings, there's going to be bruises, and it's still pretty fresh right now. Just given where we're at in the calendar. So, I kind of wanted to get that out there too, and saying, Duffer, my answer too about the shoulder, really, no surgery is a good thing, and that's kind of how you look at it. And the rest is just rest and rehab right now, and I think that he'll be ready for it's really all about getting him ready for that Canada World Junior Camp in the summer. That would be a good goal for him, a stretch goal. But if he's not, taking contact right now, I guess we'll see. That's going to be a wait and see on that too.
Yeah, and I think he's the type of player that a wait and see is, almost a certainty, right? Like we'll give you the required time and then go from there.
And he fits really well with what the Sabres already have.
You
look at the prospect pool that they have. Yes, they were able to draft Owen Power, but you look at J.J. Peterka, Jack Quinn, Cousin Krebs. There's so many young players that have different attribute to their game. They can't all be 6'2", 220 fast, and like you got to mix and match a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really a pick that I think will separate himself in a different way from all the other guys.
And of course, his Winnipeg teammate Connor Geekie was just taken by Arizona, so that's another reason to smile for James Patrick. And it was funny, with him coaching the ice this year, and you seeing him earlier. There's something about. I know we try to value the opinions of so many in this game, and there's a reason for that. They've been in it for most of their lives, and they've seen just about everything. There are some people that you trust their instincts and their words a little bit more, and I think we've already seen a fair amount of that come to light with Peyton Krebs. And knowing full well what James Patrick thinks of this young man, I think, honestly, and maybe it's personal because we know a little bit more about James Patrick, but I really think it validates the pick that much more.
So when I was talking about Peyton Krebs to James Patrick, he said, look, there's a few guys that I've had where I never had to tell them, go, 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 like in practice. Never. Like you do your warm-up drills, you're going 75%, but as soon as the whistle blew and it's like, let's go, then you know Peyton Krebs was going 100%. You know Matt Savoie is going 100%. And he pointed out those two guys to me earlier, which was amazing. He says, every so often at the start of the season, you got to blow the whistle down after the first drill and say, what's happening? You guys are taking it easy. We're going 100%. And I love Jeep because James Patrick, if you remember, Duffer, watching him, but in practice, the guy never stopped. He went so fast in every drill.
He just stopped on the line changes. And
not even on the line changes.
No, you told me the too many men thing, remember?
Exactly.
He got out early.
He got out early. He was always going early. He had that motor, and he wants his players to have that motor. So we're seeing it in a way with Peyton Krebs, and I think it's going to continue to develop. We saw it with Matt Savoie with the highlight packs, and probably the Sabres got to watch some practice film, got to watch some game film. They watched the overall player, not just a highlight pack for 5 minutes.
Bobby Margarita had him at number 9 too, Bakes. So this is, seems like it lines up.
No, I think he was taken right where I think a lot of folks had him, and it's kind of how it was all year. Actually coming into this season, Savoie was, kind of right there maybe as a top 5 guy. So in theory, coming into the season, he actually fell. Now, that's not necessarily a demerit on his game. It likely speaks to how others rose up, maybe larger players, because we all know there is a little bit of a size obsession when it comes to the NHL. But Savoie, going back to the point, too, you're making about Krebs and that familiarity. Marty, Duffer, you and I, we did a podcast last week, and we talked a little bit about potting players and so on. This is kind of an example of that in a way. And I like the idea of, that relationship. Savoie doesn't come in, cold off the street looking to prove himself. He has a guy that's going to show him the way a little bit, that's familiar with his game, that's familiar with the person, help him acclimate to the room. And when he does get here, it's just going to be that much easier for Savoie to just relax and play the game and use his teammates. And, I think it's going to be just such a win having Peyton Krebs around. And that goes back to the, some of the understated things we talked about when Krebs arrived in Buffalo in the trade from Vegas was that leadership. He's cut from that leadership cloth. And I think that's really going to shine through as he becomes a more mature human being when Savoie comes into town as well. The timing of this is really good for both of those players.
What did you think of the first 2 picks?
I was very surprised at both of those picks. I guess there was a lot of chatter that Slafkovsky could go 1. I think just because of, his resume that he put together this year was the Olympics and the World Championship and what he did against men. I've just never, I still didn't want to believe that it could happen, Duffer, because I think, he still has some things to work on in his skating game, in my opinion, in terms of his acceleration and just kind of smoothing and straightening out his stride a little bit. But, I mean, you can't argue the goal scoring. You can't argue the attitude. I think that's a kid who's going to do really well handling the pressure with that confidence that he has in Montreal with the press and everything that comes with being a Canadian. So surprising, but at the same time, I guess, it took seeing it to really believe it. Simon Nemeth, I was kind of shocked at that pick. I mean, it makes sense for where Jersey is as far as what they, want to be moving forward and getting some balance in their youth movement that they have going on. They have a very good fleet of centermen. They got some capable wingers. They were missing that, another just young, very intelligent, all situations defenseman. The thing about Nemeth that surprises me, though, is that he played in Slovakia's professional league. It's not Sweden. It's not Finland. It's not even the Czech league. So you can see the player. He did play, at high-level international tournaments against men. But do you really know what you have? Like Slafkovsky played in the Finnish league. He played in the Olympics. He played in the Worlds. You have a really good idea there.
Yep.
Do you really, truly know what you have there to have the confidence to take him over a Shane Wright or over a Logan Cooley? So that's why it was surprising for me. But, I mean, those are the 4. Those 4 were the top 4, though.
Okay. So you just answered my next question, because right defense was obviously a real focal point for New Jersey, and that's why they passed by a couple of significant forwards in Logan Cooley and Shane Wright. How did your viewings compare between Nemeth and David Jiricek, who ultimately went to Columbus?
So I would take Jiricek first in this draft, just because I think that his game translates to the NHL style. I'm sitting in Tasker's chair. Sorry, I almost said NFL. No, I just think he's physical. He's got the booming shot. He's a good skater in terms of his, defensive zone footwork. I just think that there's more of a translatable skill set there. I think Nemeth has to get stronger. He's got to win more board battles. But I think ultimately what was appealing to Jersey was the hockey IQ, the sense, his reliability, his three-zone intelligence. But there's still some speculation there. You're still projecting a little bit. I see Jiricek as more of a sure thing, open ice hitter, very tough territorial defender. I've said that word a lot this draft season. I think it's something that I always look forward to when scouting defensemen who plays big, who can go out and lay the body and really defend the net. So in that sense, really the only demerit I see in Jiricek's game is his skating stride, but it's more of a cosmetic thing. He gets from A to B really well. It's just a choppy stride. Simon Nemeth is a much prettier player to watch also, and I think that led to some of the appeal that Jersey had there. But I'm a Jiricek guy.
And the Devils have, of course, won some lotteries and held some positions here of late, which has allowed them to stockpile up front. So in that way, it is very much less surprising that they went with a defenseman here.
Yeah, less surprising, although you have the second overall pick, and then Shane Wright is sitting there, and you pass Shane Wright, and then he gets passed at 3. Seattle's sitting at 4, and they're saying, well, maybe we're thinking of trading the 4th overall pick if we could, but now that Shane Wright's available, we're not doing that. So I think it kind of played weird. Basically, so Columbus picked Jiricek, as you pointed out. They just made a pick with Denton Matechuk. It seems like between 9 and 16 now is getting really interesting, where some players that we thought were on the board for the Sabres at 9 may really be in play at 16 as well. So what are we looking at now that we see Connor Geekie go to Arizona and now Matechuk go to Blue Jackets?
Well,
Matechuk, sorry.
Yeah, Matechuk, he's an interesting one. I'm kind of sad to see Minchikov go because I think that he would have been really one to look for there. I think with, Korchinski going earlier, Matechuk, you're starting to see a little bit of a run on defensemen that I wasn't sure was going to come this early. 16, the Sabres in theory, we've thought that, at some point they want to stockpile some defensemen in this draft. Does it have to start at 16? It doesn't necessarily have to start at 16. 16 could be a spot where they go back to the well and maybe get another centerman. Yuri Kulich would be right there, I think, in the wheelhouse. If he's there, I think he's compelling. I really think that this is a surefire NHL player. Plays with heart, plays with grit, and he has some really translatable offensive skills. And you want to talk about a different player than a Savoie. Savoie, you get the little firecracker that everything's fast. You have a little bit of a different look in Kulich with the intensity, the big shot, what he can do in all 3 zones. Another guy that gets to the middle, by the way, which you have to go in the NHL. Another guy that I could maybe see being appealing there, Frank Nazar. I mean, I thought that 9, honestly, was a spot that you start to think about him. And I think Nazar could be.
But how about the Jackets here with 2 defensemen?
Yeah.
Wow. Really impressive for them on their blue line. I mean, this is. I agree, Bakes. I think that they're finding themselves, the Sabres, in a really interesting spot again with a couple of offensive options.
No, I do. And again, I think that you're still maybe in that best player available mode right now. Kulich would be a guy that I can make a case to be the best player available, maybe even right now, to be honest with you, in this draft. So, if he lasts, it'd be really compelling. Just kind of going through, and I'm trying to catch up on the picks as we go here. As we've been talking, I've been missing a few. But, and another guy that I want to, throw out there, I think, I was trying to find if there was a defenseman. I think at some point here in the teens, kind of a project. Owen Pickering is going to be a really interesting player to watch. He's a left shot D. Yep. This was a kid who was 5'7", 130 pounds just 3 years ago at the WHL Bantam Draft. He's now 6 foot, 180, 185. But you're talking about a little bit more of a project player, but he's a big transition D. He's got the reach. You got a very nice ceiling there to think about with him, and he's one of those guys that's just been on the rise all year.
I mispronounced Matechuk. I'm not going to mispronounce this one, Jonathan Lekerimaki. We talked about him this afternoon. There's 3 picks now before the Sabres have to go again. Is this a sweet spot for maybe a very dynamic winger that we talked about plenty with some of the experts?
Yeah, looking at the board now, I'm surprised that he's still there. If you think about it, if you have a dynamic winger, like you say, probably, I would make an argument that he has the best shot in this draft, him and Kemmel and maybe even Furcus, who's going to be a later, first, early, second-round pick. These guys can fire the puck. Getting another guy that can fill the net is never a bad thing. He would certainly be in play for Buffalo if he's there. I would be very surprised if he lasts, honestly. I know there's 4 picks until Buffalo goes again, but if he's there, another one very compelling. I would even make an argument that, him or Kulich would be 2 guys that you have to really think about if you're Buffalo if they're sitting there.